We welcome you back, and Zim has arrived just in time.
That's right, Paul. We made it to the final week of the regular season. We have 3 straight days of SEC football this week, beginning with Thursday's Egg Bowl, and that's where we start today's headlines. The Clarion Ledger. Joe Moorhead, he has lied. He lied to the media last week. What did he say? Well, he actually said that in preparing for Abilene Christian last week that they would not look ahead to Ole Miss. After that game, Moorhead came clean. He said, yes, we were in fact preparing for Ole Miss during the week.
Liar, liar, pants on fire.
That's right. Well, it's probably a good idea for Joe Moorhead. They only have 4 days to prepare on the short week for Ole Miss. Ole Miss coming off a bye as they get ready for that one.
That's not fair.
Yeah, well, Abilene Christian's a nice little tune-up. On Friday, that's Thursday. How about Friday? We have Missouri and Arkansas. And for Missouri, Derek Dooley, he told the media today that Kelly Bryant's still not 100%. We know about his lingering hamstring issue that caused him to miss the Georgia game. But Bryant also has had fluid drained from both knees. That was prior to Saturday's loss to Tennessee. So Bryant banged up. He will give it one more go this week at Arkansas on Friday. And on Saturday, we got a lot of games on Saturday.
This is a big day.
Florida and Florida State at the Swamp. Jabari Zuniga, the star pass rusher for the Gators, he is back. He will be on the field as the Gators try to beat FSU in the Swamp for the first time, believe it or not, since 2009.
That's ridiculous.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, some big games. Starting Thursday, Paul, the importance of this Egg Bowl for Matt Luke and Joe Moorhead and these two programs.
Yeah, I will say, having been at both campuses recently, it just seems to me that there's maybe a little more pressure on Moorhead. Luke's record is not spectacular, but I got the feeling that they really like and love Luke in Oxford. I'm not sure the feeling is quite that intense in Starkville.
Got any plans for the game, Paul?
Watching it. Reminder to those of you who are wondering where we will be all week, we'll be right here other than Thursday, the show in the usual spot Friday from Auburn. Let's go to Hayden in Birmingham. Hello, Hayden. Welcome to our program.
Hey, what's up, Paul?
Hey there. Thank you so much.
No problem. I love your show. And I just want to talk to you. Say Alabama loses this weekend, and LSU wins the SEC championship. Who in your mind do you think that who gets that 4th spot?
Now, you said if Alabama loses, is that right?
If Alabama loses to Auburn this weekend and LSU beats Georgia.
I think it would come down between Utah and Oklahoma. I'd probably give it to Utah, assuming they beat Oregon.
Yeah, I'm thinking that too. And thing about Oklahoma is if they lose to Baylor with their Big 12 championship, just come down to them. Would it come down to Baylor and Utah?
Yeah, I'm not sure Baylor would fare very well in that conversation. The resume would be pretty weak.
I got you. And one more question, if you don't mind. What do you think the score of the Iron Bowl is going to be this weekend?
I don't know yet. That game is. I mean, I just have not made up my mind. But thanks for the call. Do appreciate it. Steve is in Kentucky. Steve.
Hey, brother, man, it's good to see you again. I always watch you from 3 to 7.
Thank you.
Every day.
Thank you very much.
Well, you're a very, like that guy who hadn't talked to his brother in 16 years where your heart just went out to him. I mean, you're just a good human being as well as very knowledgeable about football.
Well,
so I enjoy your show.
That means a lot.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, 2 things I want to talk to you about. Hayden just stole my question. What if Alabama and Georgia both lose? But I do have another point I can make. I was watching, Mark Stoops met with some Florida State officials in Cincinnati about a week ago. And I think it was in his last post-game press conference where he said he was not leaving Kentucky. He was staying right where he was. So
yeah, listen, we just played that a minute ago, and he did say it. He said, "I want to be at Kentucky. We have unfinished business." And by the way, I'm not doubting the coach. I will also say this though. Sometimes it's difficult to completely and thoroughly evaluate a job offer in the middle of a season. So, I mean, if that's what he said and if that's what he means, then I'm not here to take exception to it. I think I think a week from today, if he says it again, I would probably put a little more credence in that than I do today. I mean, you have one more game to go. You're against your rival. You're not about to get too deep into a conversation about leaving.
Now, let me tell you who should get that job. And this, you're not going to believe, Todd Grantham. That guy should have been a head coach a long time ago. He puts up a ferocious defense at Louisville, at Florida, wherever he goes. If you want a great defense, that guy, I think, has earned a shot after all these years of being an assistant coach.
You always wonder about assistant coaches because, some never get an opportunity, some do, and, sometimes it's a matter of how they interview, their agent, I mean, the problem with a lot of not young, but the problem with a lot of assistant coaches, they all have the same agent. So you may have one agent representing six. There was a situation a couple of years ago at the University of Tennessee. You had 3 assistant coaches all trying to get the job. They were all represented by the same guy. How does that work out? Obviously, one of them got it. Let's check out Steve. Well, they'll just go to Steve. Mike is up next. Mike, go right ahead. Hey, Mike.
Yes, sir, Mr. Paul. Yes, sir, Mr. Paul. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
First time calling. Listened to you for years, watched you for years. Just
Thank
a
you.
quickie. I'm new to this. I just have your thoughts on, say, Bama gets by Auburn with Mac. I think even with Mac, Bama is better than Georgia, personally. We put 19-20 on A&M. They struggle with A&M. Just wondering your thoughts on that.
Listen, I think you could have a healthy debate right now between Alabama and Georgia. I'm not. I went with Georgia yesterday in the poll I voted in, but not by very much. I mean, it's not hard to find fault with Georgia. The one reason why I don't think it matters is that Georgia will take care of itself. Georgia has found itself in a better position than Alabama in spite of the loss, and if Georgia wins against LSU, it's a moot point.
Okay, I was just thinking with the loss at home with South Carolina and then struggling with A&M,
Yeah.
Bama handles that. Bama's only loss is LSU.
But here's the deal:
Kind of thought.
You can't put Alabama in over Georgia if Georgia beats LSU.
True. I don't think that's going to happen, but
No,
that's my opinion.
but that's why I'm not. I've seen some. I mean, listen, it's a talk show. It's the end of the bar conversation. I saw some
Yes,
poll
sir.
a minute ago. I think it was CBS that had Georgia ranked behind Alabama. The committee won't do that tomorrow, but I would be willing to bet you that inside that room right now, if we could take a camera in there, it would be a pretty narrow debate.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Paul. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thank you. But because it won't matter, I don't think they would do it. It's just, I mean, I think Alabama is number 5 again this week, and next week it could be a different situation. Hey, thank you for the call. I do appreciate it. Let's go to Kenny next in North Carolina.
Hey, Paul.
Hey, Kenny.
Hey, them guys just sort of summed up a lot of it, but which is no doubt Alabama's going to beat Auburn this weekend. And whether they beat them by a point, overtime, 3 points, whatever, and there's no doubt that LSU is going to beat Georgia. And I think Alabama is a better team than Georgia, even though we don't have our gunslinger out there. So if all that happens, which is Alabama beats Auburn and LSU beats Georgia, will they move them up?
So let me make sure. Let me follow you again, Kenny. I got lost. So if If LSU beats Georgia and Alabama beats Auburn,
Correct.
well, yeah. Well, I mean, listen, Georgia's done in that case.
Okay, they will be definitely done, you think?
Oh, listen, Georgia cannot afford another loss.
Okay, well, that's what I was wondering. I mean, it seems like everybody's in love with Georgia in this situation.
No, I mean, listen, if you skip ahead, the games are 2 different weekends, but if Alabama gets past Auburn and Georgia loses to LSU, Alabama will either be 4th or 5th in the final poll. Georgia will not be in either position.
Okay. Now I got another question. This is something that comes up. I got a heap load of Alabama sites on my Facebook, and
Okay.
one of them come up that, are you a true homegrown fan of Alabama? Which I was born and raised in Palm Beach, Florida, but my dad grew up in Adra, Alabama, and we had our family reunion in Hueytown, Alabama.
Sure.
And my son is 26 years old, and his name is Bear. Could I be considered a true Alabama fan or homegrown?
Listen, the goal here's the tiebreaker. Okay. If your son is named Bear, you are an Alabama fan.
Okay.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate it. And Jeff Foxworthy would agree. Let's take a break.
Let me say this. There was a comment I made after the game, and I want to apologize if it came out wrong to Arkansas. I love them. I had a great time up there. I had some good friends up there. By no means that was to demean them. That was just the mood of our football team, and that we have bigger goals down the road. So if I said something wrong, I apologize to them. I know those guys are some good guys up there. Really appreciate those guys. All right, on to Texas A&M. A good football team, well-coached football team. We got good players, and this is going to be a big challenge for our team. And we have to take the emotions out of last year, focus in on this year. We're just a different football team. We're playing them at home, but we're going to have to play a complete game to win this game. I like the way Mo played. I think that he did some really good things. The first play was the same play that Ole Miss ran against it. He made a tackle, which was a nice tackle, saved it from making a big play. Grant is full speed. I just talked to Jack. He's going to work out today. He's going to practice every day this week. I think the rest helped him. And I told him that after the game. I said, although those things happen, we got to look at the plays that we could have made. The plays we did, let's face it, we didn't play well on defense. I watched the film again this morning. There's a lot of things that we got to get better at starting the day. They're very challenging, and they're very well coached.
And then just Kellen Mond as a quarterback over there. I don't know where he is as far as their expectations, but what do you see out of him as a quarterback that could be potentially dangerous?
He's dangerous. Last year he had a lights-out game against us, running the ball, throwing the ball, big receivers, great scheme. I think this is one of the better players we're going to see all year.
And secondly, with the implementation of so many spread offenses around the country, does it change the way you look at the running back position and the versatility that's now expected out of that position?
Clyde's perfect for it. The little running back, the scat back, especially the back that can catch the ball out of the backfield. The big bruising tailback, not to say that he can't play in this offense, but it just doesn't fit. I'm for it. As much as we can do for Joe, I'm for it. We don't do it inside the meeting room. With myself personally, I know in my heart he's the best player in the country. I think he ought to win it. I'm biased, but that's how I feel. It's going to be great for the university. It'll be great for Joe. He deserves it. And the best thing about Joe, he don't want to talk about it. He just wants to talk about the next game. So he's a very unselfish player, but very deserving of the award.
You're watching the Paul Finebaum Show, presented by Regions Bank.
Welcome back. Just listening to Coach O during the break. For those of you who weren't with us, talking about the game against A&M, and certainly another similar situation to what Georgia had last week. This game just kind of pops up at the end of the year. It is a rivalry game, always happens this weekend, but still a tough spot before the SEC championship game. Brooks Cabina joining us from The Advocate, covers the team down there. Always great to have him on our program. Brooks, good afternoon, and kind of give us a state of the LSU program with 2 weeks remaining, but this week in particular, a revenge game of sorts, big game, but still kind of weird with the SEC game next week.
Yes, this one certainly is one that the LSU Tigers are honed in on. I mean, from the end of the Saturday game against Arkansas, a lot of the players were already talking about their memories about Texas A&M last year, and Joe Burrow kind of was asked about it, and he said, excited for Saturday, and kind of they asked him a little bit more about it, and he just took a coy sip of his water and said, it's a chance to go 12-0. But it's something that's certainly on their minds. I talked to a few others about this game. It's something they certainly haven't forgotten at Ogeron. Talking this morning, he was asked about that premature Gatorade bath he got at the end of near the end of regulation, and thought they had won, and he had to wear that the rest of the game. So, I mean, this is an important game. They've already clinched the SEC West, but they can't afford more than one loss. So if they lose this one, they have to beat Georgia in the SEC title game to even think they could make it into the playoffs. So, there's a lot more than just rivalry to this, but certainly an interesting game coming up for sure.
What specifically was there about the end of that game last year that just carried over not nearly, 52 weeks later?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of hard feelings. They thought they should have won that game, and they still feel that way. And so all that kind of goes into it. But so there's the emotional value to it, and but there's also something interesting Joe Burrow talked about on Saturday is the Texas A&M game was kind of where they found themselves with the offense that they kind of run now. Towards the end of the second half, they started to run more spread plays. This was a team that was max protect for most of the year. Bring in a tight end, an extra running back to block because their pass protection was not good. So that was the first time where they thought, okay, if we get more guys out of the backfield, produce more options to throw for Joe Burrow, we'll give up less sacks, and it worked out. Part of it, Burrow admitted, was because they'd run out of plays. So toward into the overtime, they kind of had to expand on some things, and then they went into the Central Florida game in the Fiesta Bowl and went more spread, and Joe Burrow had a heck of a game, and I think that catapulted him into this season, and that's when they started to really realize that that's the offensive direction they wanted to go.
I realize, Brooks, coaches and players don't get caught up in this, but you as a media member, it does seem like whether this is a correct narrative or a false narrative, we're trying to make a big deal about the LSU versus Ohio State debate for number one. I'm interested in where you stand on that particular question.
I think it's an interesting debate. I think there is a debate there. Ohio State is now in the heart of its conference schedule. I mean, they played against Penn State pretty tightly for most of that game, and they'll have Michigan coming up, and we'll really have a full understanding of just how complete a team Ohio State is. I think you can think of former teams like USC where they were just blowing out everybody in their conference just because they were proving to everybody that they were head and shoulders above everyone else, and I think that's what Ohio State was doing for most of the part. Up until the Penn State game, nobody was within 21 points of them. I think Clemson's kind of doing the same thing since their close call with North Carolina. But I think for sure, seeing how Ohio State does against Michigan and in their Big Ten championship game, you can start to have more an apples to apples comparison with LSU, and I do believe it is a close call.
Brooks, does any of that really matter right now, though? Not to you and me, because we talk about it, but to the LSU players. I mean, you've already answered part of the question, how locked in they are, but it doesn't seem like this team has lost its focus at all this year.
No, I think you'll hear the same thing, even if it weren't true. I think all players and coaches kind of say they take it week to week. But it's shown that way for LSU. I don't think they've really had a game where they've completely slipped up throughout the game. Ole Miss, they had some defensive issues, but I don't think that's because they were looking ahead. I think that was just they didn't expect some things that Ole Miss was going to do offensively. So, no, they're very focused on this, and they know. I mean, if you make 1 through 4 seed, you're in the playoff, and I think that's ultimately what matters. And I think if they believe in themselves offensively and defensively, I think whoever it is they play, they feel like they might have a chance to win. And honestly, I mean, we can talk about Ohio State and whether they're the toughest team to play. I think Clemson's good as well, and I think they all realize whoever they play in that first round is going to be tough. So down the line, I think that it really doesn't matter as much as we try and make it so.
We talked so much about Coach O and Joe Brady, and a fan called in earlier and said, fairly disappointed in Dave Aranda. I mean, he was the king of the coaching staff for such a long time. What's he been like this year answering questions about a defense that does not look up to standards?
Yeah, well, Ed Ogeron's the guy who talks. We don't get a chance to talk with Dave Aranda. I think Ed, the way Ed Ogeron talks about him, he shows his full support for him. He's a very loyal coach to his staff, but I think they focus on week-to-week game plan and how the effect of the offense. And they've been pretty truthful or open, I guess you would say, about how the offense's impact has been on the defense. How there's been more plays, less time on the sideline, and I think there are a lot of offensive coaches who have debated that over time to make say that doesn't really happen. But LSU's kind of shown that they've. There's been, I really do think with Dave Aranda, it's been a game-to-game game plan. I remember back in the Texas game, there was some criticism because they weren't able to get to Sam Ehlinger, and they gave up, 38 points, and, that nobody could call themselves DBU after that. But, they couldn't get a pass rush because they were trying to, contain Sam Ehlinger and keep him from running him, and they were forcing him to beat with his arm, and he just happened to almost do that. I think throughout different games throughout this year, I mean, Ole Miss, I think you really saw Grant Delpit playing at a position where he was injured and trying to play through that. So I think there were some things that they've tried to adapt over time. So they've covered for that, and I think there are some questions for Rand to answer. But they have been dealing with an offense that I think has impacted them significantly.
We heard O talk last week about divinity. I'm not trying to become a conspiracy theorist, but that I realize players have problems. But the timing of that was odd, and I just wonder if there's something more going on the defensive side of the ball, especially with the elite players.
There's been I don't know if there's any conspiracy to really talk about. There were some personal issues throughout the season, and Ogeron's kept those things quiet. And I've heard my own things, but sometimes I don't. Say things on, just, there's some principle that I have for that, based on what I hear and what's confirmed. But I don't really think there's too much of conspiracy going on. I mean, there's just internal things that they do with players, and you've seen that on the offensive side too. Sadiq Charles has been out for 6 games with coaches' decisions, and they've had to manage those things. But it's just part of what they've done, and. Divinity it's been clear. I mean, he used to be their sack leader until Jacoby Stevens stepped in and had 3 sacks last week. But it's been made clear that if he could be eligible for the national championship game, so that would be 9 games that he'd miss. So that seems like the kind of internal things that they're dealing with right now.
Just happened to be coming at some pretty awkward positions. Anyway, Brooks. It's onward. One more thing, Joe Burrow. I mean, he's now the darling of the country. He's gone from maybe the 3rd or 4th best quarterback to the ordained number 1 pick in the draft, the prohibitive favorite for the Heisman. I'm assuming he hasn't changed very much in all this. What's it like?
He hasn't really mentioned the Heisman as much. I think he understands how good they are as an offense. And that's kind of the terms he puts it if you ask him any questions about that kind of stuff. On Saturday, he did mention that some of the offensive records that they had may never be broken again. And I think that's, a sense of what they've been able to accomplish offensively. And, there have been questions about that the past couple of weeks. Ever since they beat Alabama, he's been the clear front runner. And, someone asked Ed Ogeron today about whether he thought he would win the Heisman, and he said Ed Ogeron said that in his heart he thinks that he's the best quarterback in the nation, best player in the nation. So he's kind of along those lines we've talked about, focusing on the week and what people have. And I think within this offense, he's had to maintain focus because it's based a lot on what he sees. And I think as he makes decisions in a game, it kind of boils down into more of a macro level of how he approaches the day-to-day as well.
Great stuff. Brooks Cabina joining us from The Advocate. Brooks, thank you very much. Always great to have you on.
All right, of course. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Outstanding report there from Brooks. We will take a break. More of your phone calls here at 855-242-7285. So we are back, and we flip over to the control room to see what the boys have been up to.
The Iron Bowl.
Take it away,
right?
Mark.
Now, Paul, you studied and know this rivalry probably better than anybody. But I saw a stat today that I had to triple check. I couldn't believe it.
You dug deep into Iron Bowl lore?
Paul, it's a did you know? And I like just this full screen that Alabama is 0-6.
Oh, yeah.
When playing a ranked versus ranked matchup at Jordan-Hare Stadium in their history.
That is true. I mean, and there's not a lot of data, but the famous Kick Six game.
Yep.
And the one 2 years ago.
Yeah, but this is.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about Saban, but yeah.
All time. They've never beaten a ranked
well,
Auburn team.
Remember something about this rivalry. Until
they were in Birmingham.
Until 1989, they didn't play at Jordan-Hare Stadium.
Right. Still, that's 20 years, 10 games, 6 matchups of ranked teams. That's
30.
Right,
30 years even.
30 years, yeah. That's amazing to me that is the case. For all the accomplishments that Nick Saban has.
Also, I mean, listen, Saban's,
Alabama
Saban's 0-2, so you go back a couple of other games, and it's, I mean, when Auburn's good, they're really good.
Yeah.
Is
this one of those teams?
They have just not been very consistent over these 30 years.
Does that stat indicate that this could swing in a different direction?
I don't think stat has, but remember one thing: Tommy Tuberville won 6 straight games against Alabama. I don't think any of those Alabama teams were. Well, one of those Alabama teams was ranked in the top 10. I don't think any other ones were.
Like what, 2003 or 4?
2000. I believe it was 2002.
Okay.
That game was not at Jordan-Hare Stadium, though.
Yeah.
Past performance, no guarantee of future results. It's a nice little.
It's just a
nice
crazy.
little nugget, but
I've never heard that
doesn't mean
before.
anything for this year's game.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It's just when you think about everything, the fact that Alabama hasn't lost more than 2 regular season games in Nick Saban's tenure since his first year, like that's an incredible stat. And when you're going through all these things, you see that a ranked versus ranked matchup on the Plains has never gone to Alabama's way. That's one of those things that makes wow.
It's too bad they're not ranked. They wish they weren't ranked this week.
Right.
Let's get back to the calls and talk to Fox, who is next up. Hey, Fox.
Hey, Paul. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. This is the most fun I've had in years watching your show, Paul.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Well, I'm a big LSU fan, and that's part of it, Paul.
Well, that's it's been a great year then.
Yes, sir. I wanted to ask you about Arkansas, Paul. When old Lou Holtz was coaching, we used to fear playing them. And I just want to see what your thoughts was on this little boy. He's a pretty good coach there at Tech. And wonder if
Arkansas... he's had Skip Holtz has been at East Carolina, South Florida, and at Tech he's had a good run, a very good run.
Well, you think any of that alumni in Arkansas would consider him?
I don't know. I mean, certainly he's got a good pedigree, doesn't he?
I would think so. Of course, them people in Ruston be mad at me for mentioning it. They love him there.
They do. Listen, Skip Holtz has had some ups and downs throughout his career, but he survived all of the off the field issues. And I don't know Skip very well, but I have no idea whether he is someone that Arkansas would want. Remember when Lou Holtz was at Arkansas in the 70s or 80s?
Been a while.
Yeah.
But they was pretty good, seemed to me, like in them days.
Yeah, no, I believe he was there, may have been the mid-'80s. I really don't remember. It's been a while. But Lou went from Arkansas to Minnesota to Notre Dame, I believe, yes. Well, it's a name I have not heard before, so you've kind of stumped the band here with that one.
Well, let me one more thing. Oh, what would poor old Joe have to do to not get the Heisman?
He would have to throw about 6 interceptions Saturday night against Texas A&M.
Lord, I hope he
all for touchdowns.
Oh my, I hope not.
No, I have seen. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa lost the Heisman the final 2 weeks last year, and it's happened before. But for someone to lose the Heisman, this is going to be a cliche here. Let me warn you. Someone else has to win it, and right now Chase Young at Ohio State probably would be in the most presumptive position because he has 2 monster games ahead. If he completely dominated Michigan and the Big Ten game like he did against Penn State, and Joe just went off the rails. So, I mean, there's precedent for it. Peyton Manning, same thing, 22 years ago, but I don't see it happening. Hey, thank you. Appreciate the call. Let's talk to Gary up next in Georgia. Hello, Gary.
Hey, Paul, how are you?
I am well. Thank you for the call.
Hey, thank you for taking my call, and enjoy watching your show with my son every single day.
Well, thank
you.
you.
Just got a couple things I want to say about Georgia, and then ask you a couple questions. Everybody seems to have already counted Georgia out, and I know LSU is LSU, but I really think Georgia's got a shot of playing with them, beat them, and simply because, and I know Georgia's offense has struggled at times, but that defense, you can help me out here. I think they're ranked like number 2 or number 3 in the country.
Oh, they're unbelievable.
I'm just wondering, what your thoughts are on, why is Georgia being, looked over? And again, I know LSU is LSU, but I still think we've got a great time of playing well against LSU and beating them. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this will be said a few more times between now and the SEC game, but Georgia is reminding people of early Nick Saban teams at Alabama that just simply won on defense. The offense at times was painful to watch, but I don't have a problem with it. It's only a problem if you turn the ball over like Jake Fromm did in the South Carolina game and you lose.
Right, exactly.
By the way, Georgia doesn't have to do anything other than win. They're not in a beauty contest. And Kirby knows that. He's
my
not.
My son and I, we talk about every day is, we just got to win out.
I said that the other day that Georgia has everything in front of them, and you would have thought I'd committed some crime with all the blowback from fans. Like,
oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
I have no problem with what he's doing. In fact, sometimes coaches don't always make the right decision. He's playing the percentages, and here's a coach who has blown big leads before, and I would think that Auburn game had to trouble him a little bit, the way that game nearly got lost.
And it did. It was very, very close there at the end, and then again this weekend we played A&M at home in a pouring down rain in the first half, and didn't play offensively, didn't play well at all, and just did enough to hold on.
But Gary, when you trust your defense, it enables. I watched it last night with the Patriots. They threw a couple of big plays to lengthen drives, but Bill Belichick knew he didn't have to do very. Why risk it when you're going to win the game?
Right, I agree. Well, Paul, I appreciate you taking my call. I know you got some more callers waiting, and sort of tell everybody out there in TV land, go Dogs.
Hey, thank you very much, Gary. Great to have you and your son listening and watching. Mike is up next. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Miss Palm.
Hey there.
Paul, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you.
Oh, good. First-time caller, and I was just wanting to let the whole nation know you have 4 teams up there, and you have 3 quarterbacks from Georgia.
You're right.
And I haven't heard that, but the thing about the Georgia offense is when the offensive line stands up, they look like bears. And it's just hard for anybody. They said Florida was going to come through. They had their defensive ends that were recruited from Georgia, and they said the defensive ends were going to just wreak havoc on Prom. Well, guess what? They didn't even touch him. And that's what's going to happen to LSU. When LSU comes to town, it's going to be bad for them. Because Prom, he will wake up.
Well, you better hope he does, Mike. Hey, thank you. Chuck is up next in Alabama. Hey, Chuck.
Hey, Mr. Paul, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I am a long-time listener, first-time caller, and to show my age, I can remember reading your columns in the Birmingham News and Birmingham Post
Well,
Herald.
if you can remember my columns, you're between 90 and 100.
Well, yeah, considering I'm in my last year of my 50s, yes, sir, you're right.
Well,
but I've got
like
two quick questions I want to ask you. What about Matt Jones going into a new situation with the Iron Bowl? And that's my number one question. And then number two, my last question, and I'll hang up and listen, is that if Ohio State loses to Michigan, how far will they drop?
Yeah,
I will hang up and listen.
Thank you very much,
and I
Chuck.
hope you have a blessed Thanksgiving.
That means a lot. Same for you. Listen, I've seen a lot of Iron Bowls, and I've seen unexpected quarterbacks, backup quarterbacks lead teams to victories. And if Ohio State loses at Michigan, I wouldn't think. I think they could conceivably still stay in the top 4 or 5. Depends on. I mean, if you see Alabama win, that's going to be the dangerous one because I think the committee might be reluctant to put Alabama in that top 4, and then run the risk of having to move them out of there the next week. But I would say they would drop to 4. That would be my best guess. Because even though this committee, I'm told, just recalibrates every week, they have to think ahead. Thanks.
Thought our O-line done a nice job in protection. Jared done a really nice job keeping us in the right plays, made some good throws. I can't say enough about our tight ends, wide receivers, how they fought for the ball, going across the middle, making really a lot of contested catches. Defensively, really thought our front done a nice job keeping the quarterback kind of in the pocket there, not letting him get out and scrambling around. Gave up 3 explosive plays in the throw game there, that we'd like to have back. Didn't create any turnovers, so didn't help us there. And was really disappointed in the kicking game. It's a great opportunity for our guys to continue to improve as a football team. We've got to have a good week of practice. Got to continue to work on the fundamentals, correct some of the mistakes that we made in the game, and still searching for playing a complete game, a perfect game. Our guys are working hard to do that. When you look at Vanderbilt, one thing that sticks out to me about Vanderbilt is they play really hard. They're a physical team. They take care of the football. And you know what? You got to give Jared a ton of credit. Like anybody that plays quarterback, they probably get too much credit when you have success and too much blame when you don't. But he could have done one of two things, right? When we went in another direction, I mean, he could have give up on the season and said, you know what, I'm graduating, I'm going to transfer or whatever, but he didn't do that. That's not who he is. He's a competitor, so he went back to work, tried to fix what he wasn't doing as well, and he'll continue to do that this week. I mean, he didn't play perfect Saturday. He played really, really good, but there were some plays that I'm sure when he watches the film, he'll say, man, I wished I had that one back. So that's with everybody on our football team. So, I can't say enough about what kind of grit, determination, character that he has to hang in here. And, he's helped us kind of turn this season around. When it mattered the most, we played at our best, and the fact that you can take the football and run the game out says a lot about our offense, getting stops on defense. So, I think it just shows the will of this team.
Welcome back as we are beginning to wind things down on a Monday night. Another hour and change to go. Let's check out Stephen in Georgia. Hello, Stephen.
Finebaum, what's going on, buddy?
I am doing great. Good afternoon.
All right, man. Long time no talk to you. my wife Mary calls in. She's a diehard Georgia fan, but I root for A&M. And I got to talk to you about the officiating this week. And listen, I don't want – me and my son went to the game. Of course, he was wearing red and black. I was wearing maroon and white. But the Georgia fans around me even were like, oh, dude, you guys got hosed there. And it's there's no excuses for the officiating this year in SEC. And they won't comment on their stupid whatever they're supposed to have social media. And
yeah, you know, that's the one thing I don't understand, and I haven't had a chance to talk to anybody in Birmingham in a while, but I thought that Twitter handle was going to handle
exactly questions. Exactly. And go back and look at George Pickens' touchdown, the only touchdown of the game. He grabs the A&M cornerback's face mask and pulls him down to get open. It was so obvious the Georgia fans were laughing. It happened right in front of you. The Georgia fans were laughing. It's like, that's not a face mask? I mean, it was crazy that play wasn't called. And then the whole fumble when the A&M tight end, Windemeyer, caught it, and he was held up for like 30 seconds before he fumbled. I'm like, isn't forward progress stopped? And the Georgia fans were laughing. They're like, dude, you guys got hosed on that one again. I mean, it was comical how bad the officiating was, and they won't explain it. I mean, they won't come out and say they messed up. There's no explanation for what they do. It's like they get a free pass to stay and call whatever they want. And listen, I am not the one to make excuses for officiating. Listen, A&M lost the game, fine, but explain the calls to us. Explain why something wasn't called. And I haven't heard a peep. Well,
listen, Stephen, you don't have to explain it, but when you say you are going to, you should.
Exactly. Thank you. And it's a joke. And I wish Mike Slive or somebody from the SEC would hold them responsible. I mean, if they screw up, we're all human. Say, yeah, you know what, we missed the call. It should have been this. The NFL refs do it. The NFL.
Now, listen, I mean, I don't see every game. I try to watch as much as I can of every sampling games. But we had the South Carolina-Florida game where Will Muschamp was apoplectic. There are a couple of other games. I mean, I'm a big believer in transparency, and without that, you are going to continually open yourself up to criticism. I mean, we always hear when they're right. I don't mind hearing when they're wrong. To me, that just gives you credibility that you're willing to admit that human beings are making these decisions, even with the luxury of replay. So I know the play you're talking about, and you're not the only one talking about it. Tim is in Georgia. Hello, Tim.
Hey, Paul. How you doing?
We're doing great. Thank you.
Long-time listener, probably longer since back when you was cutting your own grass back in Birmingham. So,
well, thank you. I'm glad you've stuck with me all these years.
Look, I had an interesting scenario I wanted to run by you and see what you think of it. So, we look back and we see that Alabama, stuck there at 5, Georgia goes in at 4. Is it possible that the committee looked at that and said, well, nobody's ever been pushed out of the 4. How do we bump somebody out of the 4 once they're in?
Well, you know what? It happened the very first year. Baylor and TCU, I think, one of the two were ranked in the top 4, and they kicked them out. And they never really could explain that when Ohio State jumped in. Well, they could explain it by saying Ohio State won the Big Ten championship 59-0 or whatever it was. But I think you could make a healthy debate. I'm interested in the question tomorrow night if Rob Mullins is asked, did they consider moving Alabama up?
And my thinking is, if that were the case and this played out, and you had Georgia, Alabama does what they do, they have to win. And I'm a believer. Play your schedule, and you'll just it has to work itself out. But if it plays out, Georgia were to beat LSU, and you sit there with 3 one-loss SEC teams that just kind of beat on themselves a little, how do you do that?
Well, the problem then becomes, I mean, everyone's ordained Clemson a spot. That was done before the season started.
With all their great wins, wins they have on their schedule.
Yeah, that win over Charlotte's now looking really good. They're a bowl eligible team. I think. I don't think it would matter because, I mean, you have to put the Big Ten champion in, assuming it's undefeated.
True.
I mean, the real outliers, if Alabama had only played a better opening game, if Alabama had opened against Texas, just for the sake of argument, even though Texas cratered, they would be getting a lot more respect than they are now.
Well, when you really look at the teams and their job, the committee's job is to truly look at these teams as a whole. When you really looked at Alabama versus Georgia and you looked at their schedules and you looked at those quality wins that Georgia had, would it be inconceivable to think that they sit back and say, what would Alabama have done against Notre Dame?
Well, I think you have to do that, and I think Alabama would have won all those games.
And then you
by the way, I also think we know Alabama would have beaten South